Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nick Morgani. I'm a Unilock Territory Manager. I'm joined today by a couple of friends and colleagues, Jason Arsenault, our Contractor Services Manager.
Hi.
And also Clayton Leckie. How you doing, Clay?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. Clayton, you are the technical field representative for Ardex Americas.
That's correct.
And you are joining us today as we discuss some natural stone installation techniques. Are you excited?
Absolutely excited.
Perfect.
I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. So we're going to go through a few different methods. Most importantly, what we're going to focus most of our time and attention on is our best practice installation. You'll be able to find much of that information, a lot of tips and tricks, and in our natural stone installation guide. It's available for download at contractor.unilock.com. A variety of literature downloads there, and this one is also included.
Just like Nick said, just about everything we're going to talk about here is in this installation book. And if it isn't, you could always reach out to us. Just leave that slide there for a couple seconds, and we can answer your questions as well.
Yeah, and I'm available anytime as well. So feel free to contact me whenever you need to.
Absolutely. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So our best practice and what we believe to be the best installation method out there right now for natural stone is wet set on a concrete base. We're going to go into pretty great detail in this presentation, but we just wanted to kind of start out by asking Clay what some of these weird codes and different layers in this cross section are. Ardex X90, X78, X32. The names don't all give us a whole lot of insight about the products that we're going to be using. So why don't we pick your brain a little bit, Clay? Why don't you tell us a little bit about this stuff so that when we are talking about the install techniques, everybody who's watching knows what we're talking about.
Absolutely. No, thanks a lot, guys. So as you see here, this is a nice little cross section of the best insulation practice. We do want to be going directly over concrete. We've got to do a few different options here that you can see in these layers. What do each of these layers mean, though? So as you can see, you've got—
hang on, Clay, hang on.
Oh, sure.
We've got a couple even better cross sections for you to be able to speak specifically about a couple different things that the guys might see in the field. You know, as soon as we say concrete, guys are thinking, oh, geez, do I have to pour a brand new pad? So why don't we have a look at what it could look like with a nice clean pad, or if the pad needs a little bit of repair.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll start with the one on the left. That's the same cross section as we were just looking at. This is going to be in your applications where you've got this is when you're going to be looking at either deteriorated concrete, or you've got a sloping or ramping issue that you might need to address to make sure that water is running away from a building or off of a patio. Or you know what, you've got just old concrete, it's bald a little bit, or it's just deteriorated, it's not as flat and smooth as you'd like it to be. The stones that we're setting these days are getting bigger and bigger, which needs smoother and smoother substrates to work on to make sure that they're set properly.
Well, and so, I know a lot of guys out there right away, Clay, as soon as you say that, are thinking to themselves, man, what a pain. Like, now I'm going to have to chip away any, you know, a lot of properties, especially in mature neighborhoods, already have that concrete substrate there. And, you know, do I have to chip it away? Am I hauling it away? You know, definitely not the most efficient and you know, obviously costly as well. So what are we doing to make this as best as we can?
An Ardex recommendation is simply going to be get rid of what's weak. All right. We want clean, sound, and solid. That's what we're always looking for. So if there's some weak concrete there, you do want to go and do some preparation to make sure the weak concrete is removed. But once we're down into clean, sound, solid concrete, you can go ahead and start doing this pre-smoothing or sloping with the AM100.
So does that mean that, sorry, Clay, does that mean that if the concrete is moving, you probably want to get rid of it?
Depends on what kind of movement you're getting. Anything where you've got, say, an expansion where something's just moving and contracting and expanding over time, we can go over top of concrete like that, but you'll have to honor that expansion joint. If we've got concrete that is just heaving and shifting and causing more cracks over the years, you know what, there's probably something wrong there. We should maybe even get an engineer involved to find out exactly why we've got so much movement, and we can definitely lay out some other techniques, or have the engineer lay out specific ways to repair that movement, get a new slab poured in, and then again we can go ahead with these processes after that.
Very good.
That's really rare though.
That makes sense. Now, as far as the processes and the products involved, the suspense is killing me here. Can we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So again, we're talking about the picture on the left here. Again, that's for your existing concrete that may show some issues, and we're trying to correct that first. The picture on the right is, let's say we've got perfect concrete or new concrete. We don't have to do any pre-smoothing or sloping or any corrections to the slab. Next phase would be, do you need a waterproofing membrane? If you do, 𝐠𝐫-175 is going to be the answer. If you do not need it, well, then we can just move to the next step, and we've got to select the proper mortar to set the stone. And that's what we're going to get into very shortly here, of what mortar do I use and when. We've got a few different options, and we'll get into specifics of those afterwards, but we have a few different options to set the stone and make sure that everything's going to perform properly.
Perfect.
Let's go to the next one. So here now, we've talked about horizontal applications, but there's times that you're going to have to deal with vertical applications as well.
Sure, especially cladding a porch, for example, or doing steps.
Absolutely. So typically, you're going to see what you see on the right here. We're going to go over something cementitious, some kind of a block, concrete wall, maybe some brick.
That is a big word.
Yeah, you've got our attention now. You've got our
Cementitious.
attention. Cementitious. Wow, word of the day calendar, Clay.
That's the Ardex specialty right there. We don't just come up with products, we come up with words too.
Sure.
So in this cross section, you can see we're going over a masonry block. We can take that same AM100 that created a slope for horizontal applications, and we can use it to slope and create a nice flat surface for our vertical applications as well. After we've got a nice flat surface to work with, we go with the A+9, which is another waterproofing application for vertical. Then we can use a mortar and set our stone. But what you see on the left here is every once in a while, we're going to run into a challenging situation where we've got to set over plywood. Not ideal, but we have at least a solution to be able to install properly over top of wood. You'll have to go with building paper or tar paper. We'll have to put down the lath mesh. But then again, we're going with that AM100 screeding product, and we're going to screed the wall, get it nice and flat and smooth, put our waterproofing over top of that to protect everything below it, including the wood, and we're going to be able to proceed with our mortar and setting stone again.
Awesome. So we're still talking in a lot of product specifics here. AM100, 8+9, X77. I'm itching for the detail. Can we start to break down product by product and figure out exactly what this stuff does?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me tell you exactly what these products do and why we're using them.
Oh, hey.
One we haven't talked about so far, Ardex Artifix. We're going over a concrete substrate, whether it's new or existing, there tends to be cracks in them. If we do not address cracking in a concrete substrate, if there's ever any movement or shifting, it could be just from freeze thaw. All right. In the springtime, your house does a lot of settling. It could cause these cracks to move a little bit more. And if we don't address these, they can deflect all the way through the system. And now your nice natural stones that we just put down develop cracks. So we want to avoid that. We want to keep all the homeowners happy.
So sorry, just to clarify there, a crack in the cement base is actually going to leach up into the stones and start to pull the stones apart and crack as well?
If they're, let me add to that one a little bit too. If they're properly affixed, like with his mortars, definitely the crack will go right onto the surface.
Because everything's acting as one piece throughout.
Right.
So if one section starts to crack, it's going to develop it all the way through the entire system when installed properly.
Hey, Clay, is there any limitation on to the size of the crack that this Artifix can get to, or?
That's the wonderful thing about this product. There's no limitation. We can go into hairline cracks. I suggest taking a V-groover or some kind of an angle grinder to open up the crack a little bit more, just so we can inject directly in there. But it could be 3 inches wide if you want to. As long as it's not moving, we can inject this stuff in there. It's going to dowel itself into the slab itself on both sides and weld the concrete back together stronger than it was originally.
Amazing.
The one thing that we do expect is a little bit of a clean, dry sand to broadcast into the surface so that when we come back with a mortar or waterproofing application over top of it, this is a polyurethane. We want to make sure that we've got something to bond really well to. So make sure there's a sand broadcast on the surface.
That makes sense. Just give it a little texture.
That's it, exactly. All right, so we've got the cracks addressed. Now we can start getting into the products themselves. AM100, as we've said, this is a ramping, a sloping, pre-smoothing screed mortar that you put down. You see this gentleman, the super screeder, doing a nice wall here.
He's a
This is
ninja.
the benefit to this stuff.
He's a screeding ninja.
The screeding ninja, love that.
Wow.
But this is the wonderful product. The wonderful thing about the AM100 is that it's going to be used for your floors, for your walls. So if we got to smooth and create a nice flat surface, we're doing it with one product, no matter where we got to work. All right, you see in this picture that he's going over top of a very textured brick, but the finish is going to be perfectly flat and smooth, ready to receive some natural stone.
Awesome.
What if it's not
2 hours? It's set. So we're
Sorry,
able to get our waterproofing over top of it, or start setting our stone in 2 hours.
Sorry, just back on the AM100 for a moment. You say a nice, smooth, level surface. It is a ramping mortar, so I guess a two-part question. One, is this self-leveling? And the second part of that question is, how high can you actually go and ramp this stuff?
Yeah, the limitations on thickness and how thin.
Beautiful question, guys. We need a minimum of 1/4 inch, but it can go up to 1.25 inches. If you need to go deeper than that, we just do it in lifts. So give it an hour, maybe 2 hours to set, and then we can go and do a second or additional lifts over top of that. But we max at 1.25 inches per lift.
Do you have to put anything in between the lifts in order to get it to adhere?
No, we just ask for a scratch coat. Make sure you take the backside of your trowel, drag it across the surface that's installed already. We're going to get a nice bond. It's going to drive itself into the pores of that concrete already there. And then we'll, as it's still wet, start putting the screed over top of it. You'll get a real tenacious bond. One last thing before we move on. The second part of your question was, is this a self-leveling material?
Yep.
No, it's not.
Okay.
But it is got a really nice consistency that once you've got it mixed, even in a wall consistency, you can pour it out of a bucket. It's that flowable. But as soon as you strike it out, create your slope, start screeding it up the wall, it's set, it's going to hold. There's no sag to it. It's a
It
beautiful
sounds like a miracle product.
It is very close to a miracle.
All right, moving on.
Next is 8+9. So this is our vertical waterproofing membrane. It's 2-part. So you get a jug of liquid and a bag of powder. We mix equal parts of that together, mix it, and now it's a paintable consistency. But this is a cement-based waterproofing material. So we're going onto a cement substrate. We're going to be putting cement-based mortars over top of it. And now we've got cement waterproofing in the middle of that sandwich. It's going to be a much stronger, much more tenacious bond and better performance in the long run.
Perfect.
This stuff needs to be done in 2 coats. Your first coat gets rolled on. 30 minutes later, you come back and do a second coat, 90 degrees from the first. 1 hour after that, you're sitting on top of it. So if you can paint a wall, you can paint this stuff on.
Hey,
Easy.
Nick, there you go. Sales guy friendly.
Hey, easy now.
It also comes in white. So sometimes when we're doing exterior work in the summer, it's going to keep that wall nice and cool, and it'll be really good for your chalk lines as well.
Nice.
So next in the waterproofing, we need to deal with our horizontal applications. We're going to use this SK175 sheet membrane. This is the best waterproofing product in the market. I promise you that. This picture here is a commercial steam room. That is where water penetration is the greatest. And this is where this product works the best, because it's going to battle that steam, battle that water penetration, and make sure everything is protected on the other side of that membrane. Another big benefit of this is that it acts as a crack isolation membrane as well. So when we do have some slight cracks or movement in our slabs, as long as it's not too great, this is going to actually deflect that crack, keep it underneath in the slab, and not deflect it through our stone. So everything's going to work and function beautifully.
So
Yeah,
it
so
allows
like
It allows the two systems to move independently, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Exactly.
Right. Cool.
For anybody with a tile background, it acts almost like a uncoupling membrane.
Cool.
This is also really good for your pool applications and waterproofing in a pool application.
I could see it there on the porch in the picture on this slide.
That's correct. So this is X90. Now we're getting into setting our materials.
Could I ask one question though? I mean,
sure.
If you got waterproofing going down, then I imagine it's going to give you some waterproofing from any leaching up from maybe a wet surface underneath.
Absolutely. Obviously, we don't want anything that's overly soaked, but I mean, it's going to help prevent any moisture from coming up. It's going to really help with the efflorescence. That's a big, big one in our industry, is having to protect that staining that comes from the ground and from our substrates and affects our stone and our grout and that. It'll help protect from that. Absolutely. So now we're into mortars, our setting materials. We're starting with X90 outdoor. It's called outdoor for a reason, because that's where it wants to live, in the outdoors. Number one, it's good for cold temperatures. And in Canada, we have that challenge, either winter or in the spring and summer when we're dealing with nice days, cold nights. We want to be able to walk away from our job site and know that it's going to be okay. We're not having any worries and we can sleep at night. This is a rapid set product, so it's going to be set in 2 hours, but it can also be curing all the way down to 5 Celsius, where most mortars, that chemistry is lost once you get below 10 Celsius, and they kind of just sit idle until the temperatures come back up again. This is going to be set and hard in 2 hours. It also works in the same capacity for a hot day, or let's say we have a driving rain. 2 hours later after setting, this can take a driving rain and know that it's going to function and work properly.
So Clay, with as rapidly as that sets, is there any concern over the working time of the product?
No, even in a warmer day, you're going to get 40 minutes out of a bucket.
Oh, that's great.
40 minutes is plenty of time. We also give you a batch mixing ratio on the back, so if you are worried, you can do smaller batches.
I know somebody that's going to really test the working time of the mortars coming up shortly.
Love it. Let me do it with you. Excuse me. Now, moving on, X32. This is another rapid set product. We're looking at a 3-hour set time with this one. But this is where we need a little bit thicker of a mud bed. We got to build things up a little bit, or it's great around pools. And the other big one for this is our bigger, heavier tiles. This is going to help support that weight. It's going to make sure that it's not going to collapse on itself. Still going to set really quickly. We can get to it and finish it with some grout short time after. But it's all moisture resistant and got all that excellent exterior application technology in it as well. So it's great for pools, surrounds. Any of your exterior applications, this is just wonderful to work with. But yeah, X32.
Perfect.
And the last of the mortars that we're going to talk about today is X77. So this is great for floors and walls, but where it really excels is going on those walls, on the vertical applications. This product can hold 20 pounds a square foot. So when we're dealing with these big natural stones, we know that we can set it on the wall and it's not going to move. It will stay. It's not going to fall off. One thing that we do is usually have to brace everything and make sure everything is held onto until that mortar is set. It's still encouraged to do that, but it's not necessary with X77. It's going to hold that stuff to the wall without sagging every time. As you see in the middle picture here, our ridges are combed vertically. The reason that Ardex would like to see that done is that those are now going to act like pillars. So when we set those big heavy stones, they sit on those pillars and it's going to help hold it from sagging down. All right, so now the installers, we don't have to start at the bottom or have to brace everything. We can start in the middle or where we'd like to and then build out from there. But X77, wonderful product. This has got a 3-hour pot life as well. So 3 hours, it's going to work in your bucket. You've got 60 minutes once it's combed out on the wall to set your stone into it. So you got plenty of working time.
Okay, so now we've fixed our concrete potentially with a ramping mortar. We've waterproofed with our waterproofing membrane. We've selected the appropriate mortar for our application. We've used that. Now, what do you recommend to finish the job?
On to the grout. So FH. This is a wonderful product to work with. Again, we just mix it with water, just like our other products. This is going to work in grout joints from a 1/16 of an inch all the way up to 3/4 of an inch. So that's pretty much going to take on any grout size that you've got anywhere, interior or exterior. You can apply this like a typical grout mortar, where you're just going to use a margin trowel, or not a margin trowel, but a grout float, spread it over the entire face of the tile, let it set, and then come back and clean it. If that's the method you're going to choose, please test your tiles first. We don't want to stain or have any issues with the tile. You may want to seal them first. So make sure you do testing. That's a big thing with any kind of grout. Number two, you can put it in a bag and you can pipe it into the grout joints, horizontally or vertically, doesn't matter. I think that would give you your best results. And then you can come back about 30 minutes, 40 minutes later and just give it a nice tooling. Make sure it looks nice.
I see you have 1/16 of an inch. That's a pretty small joint. Is this a sanded grout?
It is a sanded grout,
Wow.
but our sand is so fine, and it's what we call a river rounded sand. So it's going to get into those small, tight joints because it is so small, but it's also going to support itself like marble. So when you try and push down on it, it's not able to collapse on itself. So if you were to fill a jar with marbles and shake it, the same volume of marbles. If you put sand into a jar and start shaking it, it'll collapse a little bit. Our
Right.
sand acts like marbles.
Oh, cool.
That is really cool. So, Clay, we're going to now spend some time talking about a couple installation techniques, working our way back to our best practice now that we have an idea of what your products are. Would you mind sticking around just in case a couple more things come up?
Absolutely. I'd love to stick around. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. So,
So,
go, Nick.
go ahead, Jay.
You want me to do it?
So, yeah, either way, buddy, no problem. We can share. So, when we kind of started this endeavor, I knew very little about installing natural stone. With working for Unilock and all the pavers we sell, I was a little bit more familiar with paver installation. But as you're about to see, Jason, who has a tile background and is an expert,
Yeah, I was a project manager for tile installation in Toronto for commercial.
Yep. So Jason taught me quite a bit prior to putting together this presentation, so I could speak a little bit more from a position of a little bit more knowledge, at least. So this is kind of what I assumed would be the way that you installed natural stone. This is a good installation method, but not what we would consider a best practice. Won't go into too much detail here. Just a regular compacted base with your screed and your tiles right on top.
Just like a paver.
Yep.
Proper note point here about that, though. If you're going to do that method, you're best to work with a calibrated natural stone. If not, you're going to have to individually hand set every piece. So all of Unilock's natural stones are calibrated, so you could use any one of ours, but anything else, then you're going to have to do the hand set method.
Yeah, it's just an efficiency thing. It's going to take a lot more time to deal with those.
Sure.
Let's keep rolling, Jay. So better installation, this is where now we're talking about introducing a bond bridge. So we're showing wet set on a permeable mortar bed. So kind of similar to your clear base for paving, we would recommend something that's frost-free, has some void space, like a 3/4 clear. In this particular example, it looks like they've used a dry pack mortar on top of that, and they're just kind of screeding through it.
Can I explain what a dry pack is, in case people don't know?
Please, yeah.
It's a mixed on-site mortar, probably about 4-to-1 ratio of sand to Portland, and it's mixed with a consistency that you could make a snowball with the mortar. Then you could crush that snowball, and then you could form a snowball again. So it's not wet like a mortar that Ardex has that you would mix like that. It's very dry, and it's able to screed it out like sand, like wet sand almost.
Cool. So the reason why we would recommend a permeable mortar bed, it's frost-free and settlement-free, and it's just going to help really minimize the joint separation and the cracking. Over time with freeze thaw cycles, you're just going to get very little movement, and it also facilitates drainage. Jay, am I missing any advantages to this?
Just that void space you're talking about, it has an insulating value. It's about 6 to 8 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding ground. So that's going to really help with those, excuse me, the frost-free, cell-free zone and the freeze-thaw cycle.
Cool. So as far as having a dry pack mortar there, basically what we're looking for is that you're creating a bond bridge. And what we mean by a bond bridge is there's going to be mortar on the back of your tile, and there's already mortar on the ground. And those two mortars marry up and they create a nice solid bond, hopefully eliminating as much air as possible to not allow any room for moisture to get in. Another element that is probably really important to mention here is we strongly recommend using some kind of base stabilization. Product that we endorse and that we sell at Unilock is called DriveGrid. It's made by a great partner of ours called Tensar. And this is a triaxial geogrid. So it's comprised of a series of triangles. And what that's meant to do is really spread out and disperse the point loading on the base and create a bit of a snowshoe effect. The reason why it's triangles is it just helps to move that dispersion in a variety of different directions. Jay, is there anything I'm missing there, or do you have a better way of explaining this? I feel like I'm fumbling a little.
Well, what I would say is that if you can imagine the cogs in a clock spinning around, that's what your aggregate wants to do as you put a point load down on it, and the drive grid's going to lock that in place. It won't allow it to rotate out of the way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant to say.
Good job.
Yeah. So when adhering the stone, we would recommend a latex modified thin set mortar, and all of Ardex product would fall into that range. Clay?
That's absolutely right.
Good.
Sorry, I threw you
I'm glad he was
curveball
paying
there.
attention there, Nick. Wow.
No warning. I just threw it right at you. Hurry, get off mute. Let's keep rolling, Jay.
Back buttering.
Yeah, so the picture on the left there, this gentleman is back buttering. We're going to go into a little bit more detail when we talk about best practice. You might have heard me mention slurry coat. So I'll just talk about the difference very briefly, and then we'll talk about back butter when we get into the video. As I learned from Jay, and jump in wherever you want, Jay, here, and make sure I'm giving the right information.
Don't worry, I will.
We're watering down the mortar. It's a mixed on-site mortar. We're watering it down and we're just painting the back of the stone. That would be a slurry coat, correct?
Right.
Whereas a back butter, it's a thicker mortar. It's the type of stuff that you're gonna
it's the Ardex stuff.
Be using from our friends at Ardex, and that goes on with a notch trowel. And then as you can see in the next picture there, these stones are just being mallet set to the proper surface height.
So when we decided to do this presentation, Nick really wanted to learn how to tile, which is great. He wanted to be more of an expert, feeling more comfortable talking about it. And I thought it was a great idea, a great opportunity to give him a few lessons. So I decided to record it and have a little bit of fun with him. And we're going to play that for you.
Yeah, so just as the video is about to roll here, what you're about to see is some Unilock natural stone. We've back buttered it. That's going to create that bond bridge, that thin blue line you see there. That's going on top of the Ardex mortar that we use. I believe we use the X90, but you know, any of the different mortars depending on your application. There's a scratch coat there, and that's going right on top of the poured concrete pad.
Just a quick review. Good points along the side. Concrete, structurally sound.
Yep.
AM100 if you need it. SK175 for waterproofing and crack isolation. And then you're going to trowel on your Ardex mortar, and you're going to back butter on the slab.
So just a brief introduction here. The first thing that I learned is to have your site properly staged. Again, this is just going to help with efficiency. Clay mentioned the great working time of the mortars, but there's no need to waste any additional time reaching for stuff. It's good to have everything at your fingertips. Here's a roll of SK175, the waterproofing membrane. You're going to see that in action, and a couple of the other various mortars that we're using. The other thing we have staged is all of our tools. So you're going to want a drill and a mixing paddle to mix your mortars. We've got a couple different margin trowels. We've got what I believed was pieces of rubber rectangles on a handle, but was come to found that they're actually called grout floats. There's our V-notched and our square notch trowels. Those are going to be very, very important. We're using those quite a bit. A couple different mallets just to help with heights and leveling. And we also have some screed bars and a level, of course, to keep things nice and straight and level. And finally, a hand broom to keep things nice and clean and keep the surface nice and clean. One other thing that's really important when you're mixing mortars is you're going to want the proper respiratory protection. So an N95 mask to make sure you're keeping all the dust and silica out of your lungs.
Perfect.
Jay, what was my first tip here? What was the first thing that you told me to do?
Always add mortar to water.
It's almost like we knew that was coming, eh? Look at those fancy words popping up on the screen there.
And here, this is a good trick that I showed Nick too. We read the directions on the bag and it said to use a slight range of amount of water, and I picked the middle road, which was 5 liters. I cut a hole at the 5 liter mark so that when Nick was filling up the pail, if he tried to overfill it or underfill it, he wouldn't really be able to. He just fills it up until it starts filling out and he gets 5 liters every time. It's really important to have your mortar mixed very consistently every single time you go to do an installation.
So you saw me applying a little bit of AM100 there just to kind of smooth our concrete board that we're using for this mock-up.
Totally. Just for demonstration purposes, just to show all the steps. We didn't really need to do it with a small crack like that.
Now I'm using a V-notch trowel and I'm trying to spread our mortar in a nice thin layer to adhere the waterproofing membrane on top of. You might notice that I'm struggling mightily. Part of this is my inexperience, but part of it is ignoring what we recommend as a scratch coat. So again, a scratch coat, just using the flat end of your trowel, getting just a nice thin smooth layer down, and that's just going to give the mortar something to grab onto when you're combing it out with your V-notch. And here's a couple shots of Jay rolling out the waterproofing membrane.
And you'll notice that I'm walking on it right away, which is totally fine. I'm going to be walking on it in order to seat it into the mortar. And I used one of the grout floats that Nick showed earlier, but you can use anything flat if you have a trowel around or something else to smooth it out and just to really seat it into that mortar, to embed it into the mortar. And best practice here would be to start in the middle and pull towards the outside.
Ardex does have rolls of seam tape to be able to make sure that you're closing off all of your gaps. You just butt the layers up against each other, and you can use the seam tape right over top. So now we're showing a little bit closer angle of back buttering. So a couple of key points here. One, it should not take you this long to back butter a tile. That's safe to say, guys?
Oh, it's safe to say.
It's my favorite part of the video. Every time I watch it, it's amazing. And like, believe it or not, this has not been slowed down.
In fact, I think it's been sped up a little. I struggled mightily with this. Again, be kind. It's my first time doing it. But there are a couple things that I learned even right away from the first tile. One, again, no scratch coat. Scratch coat is really going to help speed up adhering that mortar to the stone. Another thing that I think I'll give myself a little bit of credit here, if you'll allow it, Jay. The coverage on the stone is really, really good. It's about 100% here. You want a minimum of 99%.
Yeah, 95% is very good. Nick is going for more than 100%.
Thank you. Yeah.
But hey, it's practice, right?
Absolutely. The last thing that I wanted to point out here while you're getting a nice clear shot at it, the lines don't need to be perfectly straight. I'm getting a little bit meticulous, I guess would be the polite way of putting it, but they do all need to be in the same direction. And then it's important that that direction's running the same way as the direction on your base. And the reason why, Jay, as you taught me, maybe you can enlighten the others here.
Sure, yeah, you just want to allow the air to have a nice pathway out. You don't want to trap any air underneath the tile or the natural stone. So combing them all in the same direction, as you collapse them, when you're pushing down in a slight twisting action, you're allowing the air to escape. You generally would want to go towards the shortest length of the tile. So if you had like a 36 by 48, you would want to run them the 36-inch way, just so there's a shorter distance for the air to get out here. We're working with a 12 by 24 tile here, and it's totally acceptable to do it the way we've just done it there.
Yeah, that's some Buccini Bluestone, a really beautiful product out of Tuscany that we supply at Unilock. It was a gorgeous stone, really nice to work with.
Yeah,
now,
nice flame finish. That's beautiful stuff right there.
Jay, I noticed you applied the mortar in a couple different directions. Nothing wrong with that. It's just on your last pass, we want to make sure the lines are going all the same way.
You want to comb them all in the same direction before you apply the stone.
And the importance of having no air inside the mortar layer underneath.
If you trap air, you potentially could trap water, right? If the water gets underneath there and has a little bit of space to sit, you could potentially pop the tile in a freeze-thaw cycle. Sorry, this slide here. If I know Clay said they have mortar, the mortar can hold 20 pounds per square foot. Is that right?
Yes.
If you have something heavier, then you want to do some bracing and shimming and allow the mortar to have time to set up. Nick's laughing at me.
No, I'm not. It's all good. I would never laugh at you.
Okay, filling the joints. Most people here would be familiar with the polymeric sand way. Good note here is that G2 Max is the only polymeric sand rated for a concrete overlay.
And that has to do with absorption rates and not getting water into your base.
The pointing mortar way is probably one of the most commonly used ways with the more traditional guys. And that's just using the mixed on-site mortar that's underneath them, right in the joints as well. It is susceptible to damage from freeze-thaw cycles, and you have to pay attention to cleaning as it go.
Yep.
And Clay talked about his grout a lot already.
Here's your best practice, guys.
Best practice: stain repellent, water, freeze-thaw, and mildew resistant. Comes in over 30 colors, and it remains flexible, though it is very highly strong.
Yep. And I believe with that, Mr. Arsenault, that pretty much wraps it up for the day. So please reach out to us anytime, or your local territory manager. Here's all of our contact info. We'd like to thank Clay for being with us today.
Thank you,
guys. Appreciate being here.
And thank you, Jay. Really appreciate all your help and helping me learn this stuff.
No worries, man. Anytime.